Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 5th week of this massive open online course on Sociology of Development. We have completed 4 weeks of this 30-hour course spanning over 12 weeks. In the first week we have discussed historical location of the idea of development. In the second week, we have discussed decolonization, rise of nationalism in the third world and the desire for development. In the third week, we have discussed classical sociology and the notions of social change, ideas of evolution and progress. And in the fourth week, we have discussed modernization theory part 1 through the works of Hamza Alawi, through the works of Colin Lees and others. If you look at in the last week, in the fourth week, what we have discussed the first sociological account of development was the modernization theory, which postulates that the less developed economies would eventually catch up with industrialized world, provided they emulated the economic and social systems of Western capitalism. And how modernization theory is the mainstream school of scholarship about poverty and economic, social and political development in the countries of the third world, and how modernization theory was based on structural functionalism, which suggests that society is composed on the basis of complementarity and reciprocity of roles in the social division of labor, as structuralism is largely based on the theoretical premises. Modernization theory is largely based on the theoretical premises of structural functionalism. It conceptualized development as a stage transition from tradition to modernity to be brought about at the economic level, at the social level and at the political level. And we have discussed how, though the modernization theory accorded central role to the state and its public policy, it failed to examine the nature of the state itself, its location within the matrix of a class divided society and its relationship with contending social forces. In this case, then the state is thought of as an entity that stands outside and above society, as an autonomous agency that is invested potentially with an independent source of rationality enriched by technical assistance from metropolitan countries. And the state is also thought of having the capability to initiate and pursue programs of development for the benefit of the whole of society. In other words, there is an implicit disjunction between the state and society, slurring over questions about the social foundations of political power and the making of public policy. Then the problematic of the state is narrowed down to the efficacy of its public institutions and organs to achieve objectives and programs of modernization, focusing especially on the respective roles of ruling elites, dominant political parties, the bureaucracy and the military. And then we have discussed how the theories of modernization, however, are explicitly or implicitly theories of capitalist development, which are premised upon the creation and maintenance of the basic structures and institutions of a capitalist society, which may be contrasted with the notions of revolutionary change and so on. And then we have discussed how both theories of capitalist development or modernization theory on the one hand and theory of socialist development, they are engaged in the dissolution and transformation of pre-capitalist social and economic structures, but in a different way. And then we have discussed structures. When I say social and economic structures, I refer to the political system and the state. An alternative view is the one that does not reify as a whole as functionalist theory does, but proceeds instead from the idea of the social process being constituted by interactions of free acting individuals, that is the market model, nevertheless arrives at very similar conclusions to those of functionalist theories, a theory on issues of relevance. That is how we have tried to encapsulate the spirit of reification, the concept of reification, which refers to the process where the result of our actions appears to us as a quasi-natural thing or matter or object, because we do not recognize its social origins or process of creation that goes into its formation. And then we have discussed economic markets, political markets, economic markets in terms of foreign investment, free competition, structural imperatives. And when I say political markets, I intend to capture political entrepreneurs aiming to maximize votes in terms of legislation, the application of laws and authoritative allocations of value. And structural imperative is the imperative of capitalism. Its imperative character lies in the fact that it determines the consequences of all such actions. It makes the new situation successively the basis on which fresh calculations are made and corrective action contemplated. It is to recognize the possibility of disjunction within limits and at particular moments between the making of public policy and the contending interests of the dominant classes, the indigenous bourgeois, the metropolitan bourgeois and landowning classes, as well as the fact that such deviations not only have limits, but cannot persist over a long period of time, for they are soon overtaken by the consequences of such policies, which bring into play forces for an alteration of the course, so that state policies are brought into line with the requirements and demands of peripheral capitalism. This view of the economic determination in the last instance allows us to account for the stupidity and miscalculations of the guardians of the state and for the degree of freedom that they possess in possibly pursuing their own interests by virtue of being in charge of the state apparatus. And the question of the plurality of dominant classes in peripheral capitalist societies, which is unlike that in advanced capitalist countries, where we have only one dominant class to contend with, a fact that has shaped Marxist debates on the theory of the state in particular mold, one that does not easily fit the case of the peripheral capitalist societies. The problem of identifying the ruling classes and class alignments in peripheral capitalist societies is more complex than in advanced capitalist countries. We have also discussed fundamental classes, the class of exploited producers and the exploited class, whose social relations of production are constitutive of that mode of production. We have also discussed class formation and class alignments. We have discussed fractions of a single class analogous to the division of the bourgeois in advanced capitalist countries into different fractions, such as industrial capital, finance capital and commercial capital. We have also discussed auxiliary classes, class origins of the bureaucracy and so on. Then we have discussed how given the conceptual fragmentation and conflict that has overtaken development studies in general and sociology of development in particular, how there is reaction to modernization theory in Latin American countries and South Asian nations. And the distinction between traditional and modern societies we have discussed from Weber through Talcott-Parsons, Parsonian pattern variables we have discussed so far as the process of modernization is concerned, which refers to the process of transition from traditional to modern principles of social organization, and this process that is currently occurring in Asia, Africa and Latin America. And then we have discussed the demarcation between being traditional and being modern, a pair of very arbitrary abstractions from the contemporary situations of the periphery and the center of the world capitalist system. Then we have discussed Huntington's political development, an element of the modernization syndrome, democratization, political mobilization, participation, the building of nation states, administrative and legal development, secularization of equality, subsystem, autonomy and so on. And then we have tried to bring about a critique of Samuel Huntington's political order in changing societies, and the class of civilizations in terms of as social science theory, evidence, scientism as an ideology. We have tried to bring about a critique of Huntington from two vantage points, one from the bourgeois social sciences and two from the standpoint of historical materialism. Now, going to the second part of the modernization theory in terms of class, state and revolution, substitutes and realities by Theodore Sanin, the radical upsurge of 1968 and its aftermath were linked were linked to and followed by a renewed debate between the socialists about the nature of revolutions and the tactics of revolutionary struggle. When I say tactics, it is short term. When I say strategies, they are long term. Okay? You can look at the Vietnam War during and after 1968. Why 1968 is extremely important? Precisely because of a variety of historical events, which took place across the continents throughout the world, that you will see revolutions used to take place, but not exactly in the way orthodox Marxism would have thought of. For example, in Chicago, referring to the 1968 Democratic Revolution, where police beat demonstrators as they chanted, "The whole world is watching." See, if you look at the recent peasant movement in Indian context, you will find that the whole world is also reacting to this, responding to this, right? That the peasantry on the one hand and the state on the other, the government on the other, you will find that the whole world is also responding to such protests, movements, and at the same time how these movements have been crushed by the state. Okay, this is extremely important to understand the nature of the state itself in societies where you will find revolutions, movements have been contained by the state, okay, through very conventional measures, police, army, military, jail, sedition and so on. Okay. Secondly, San Francisco State, where a 1968-69 strike led by students of color, I mean I am referring to the blacks, non-whites, who made the first major breakthrough in the in the fight for ethnic studies. Thirdly, Cambodia and Kent State, referring to Richard Nixon's ill-fated 1970 invasion of Cambodia and the shooting of 4 white students by the Ohio National Guard. And if you can look at Latin American revolutionary Che Guevara. Here what we are trying to do, what we are attempting to do, okay, is precisely this, that the nature of revolutionary struggle, the nature of revolutions, it also undergoes changes over time and across space. The way orthodox Marxists thought that no, it can be carried out only by the industrial working class, okay, perhaps it was shown by Mao Zedong in the context of the Cultural Revolution in the People's Republic of China, that no, it can also be brought about by the peasantry. I mean, it is not only peasantry or only industrial working class, rather it depends upon the context. Who were the most exploited social economic classes of a particular country, of a particular region, and so on. Okay? And how Che Guevara, Latin American revolutionary, if somebody is interested, please go and watch Motorcycle Diaries by, it's a documentary by on the life of Che, and how he along with Fidel Castro, they were they led the socialist revolution in the context of Cuba, in particular in Latin American, and how it had a greater influence on other Latin American countries. Okay, this is one. That's why it's extremely important to understand the radical upsurge of 1968. You will find when I said Chicago, San Francisco State, Cambodia and Kent State, and so on. I also draw your attention to France, where in fact the students' movements were at the peak, and you will find many scholars, students, teachers, professors, they all joined that struggle against the state, against imperialism. Okay? One among them was Anthony Giddens, who became the director of London School of Economics and Political Science later on. A first-rate mind, no doubt about it. Others also joined, Immanuel Wallerstein and others. We'll also discuss Wallerstein's world system theory towards the end of this course. And you will find that how these events, they prepared some ground about the differences that we have, okay, or the differences that socialists have about the nature, about the tactics, about the strategies of revolutionary struggles. Okay? Who should lead that struggle? Who are the major leaders who are going to lead that struggle? Okay? Conventionally speaking, it was the industrial working class, but Mao, for the first time in the history of socialist revolution, communist revolution, he showed it to the world that it can also be led by the peasantry. Okay? That's why what should be the nature, or what should be the revolutionary tactics, what should be the revolutionary strategies, that there were certain differences between conventional Marxists and you may say neo-Marxists, or the proponents of dependency school. Okay? In this context, it is important to understand or examine a search for the agencies of revolutionary change and an analysis of the impediments to the revolutionary struggle form the crux of a threefold debate. What are those three types of debate? What is that threefold debate? 1. Prospects of revolution. 2. Revolutionary organizations and their relation to the classes or masses. And 3. What is the nature of the state and its relationship with revolution, the nature of the state in societies. Okay? When I say prospects of social revolution and the search for a revolutionary class, okay, prospects of social revolution and the search for a revolutionary class of our time have provided the first focus. Putting it succinctly, those sneeringly referred to by their adversaries as third worldists opposed proletarianists to coin an equally ugly term. A second argument cross-cut the first one, concentrating on revolutionary organizations and their relation to the classes or masses, the issue of a vanguard revolutionary party, of a guerrilla Foucault and so on. The third problem, the last to be confronted but not the least in importance, has been that of state and revolution, or more specifically of the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been, where a state and revolution, I mean more specifically of the nature of the state in societies. When I say, I mean there are three components again, I mean the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been contained, of the states which revolutionaries challenge, and thirdly of the state within which a revolution becomes institutionalized. Okay. Now, we have, if you slightly recall, while starting with the modernization theory, we said though the modernization theory accorded a central role to the state and its public policy, it failed to examine the nature of the state itself, the location of the state within the matrix of a class divided society, and the relationship of the state with various other contending social forces. And that is how you will find the state was thought of within the schema of modernization paradigm, that that the state was thought of as an entity that stands outside and above society. The state was also thought of as an autonomous agency which can, that is invested potentially with an independent source of rationality, I mean from the metropolitan countries, from the developed world, from western capitalist world. And the state was also thought of having the capability to pursue and initiate programs of development for the whole of the society. Okay? That is what we discussed. Now, the nature of the state in societies, we want to examine the relationship between the state and the revolutionary potential of those who could bring about social and political revolution, and therein lies the significance of the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been contained. When I say the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been contained, then the state uses its absolute power, coercive power to contain revolutions through military forces, through army forces, through police, through sedition charges, through absolute coercive measures and so on. And when I say of the states which revolutionaries challenge, it does not imply that when revolutions have been contained, it does not imply that revolutionaries do not challenge that. People will challenge. If the state becomes absolutely autocratic, dictatorial in nature, whether a capitalist state or a socialist state, whenever a capitalist or a socialist state becomes absolutely dictatorial, then people challenge that the nature of the state. Okay? Even you will find that in even a socialist state or a capitalist state, they get challenged because of the kind of coercive power that they use, that they exercise. That is why revolutionaries tend to challenge even when a particular revolution has been contained. That is why it is important to understand the prospects of revolution. Who, when I say prospects of social revolution and the search for a revolutionary class. This is very important precisely because we are discussing a search for the agencies of revolutionary change. Who are the agents to bring about a social and political revolution? Who are the agents to bring about revolutionary changes? Which class? Which group? That is extremely important to understand, examine. Okay? That is why I said then the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been contained, and whenever it has been contained of the states where revolutions and whenever there have been revolutions have been contained of the states which revolutionaries challenge, and of the state within which a revolution becomes institutionalized. Then the state changes. Maybe the hitherto existing modes of production will undergo change, because you will find a certain level of intellectual and political consciousness. There will be a rise in our critical thinking. Okay? That is why the nature of the state also becomes, is of paramount significance. If you look at perhaps Copernican revolution, Galileo and others, that they also had to fight against the state, against the kings, to make a revolution, to make revolutionary changes possible in the world of science. Socrates was given poison to drink just because he questioned the state, questioned the king, the powers that be. Similarly, you will find that whenever there is a question of change in terms of the ways in which different classes have been treated by the state, the way is in which marginalized communities, the downtrodden, the women, the Dalits, the way they have been treated, perhaps that also gives us a space through which we can say that no, we must challenge the state. Okay? You look at caste hierarchies, you look at patriarchy, you look at class relations, relations of production and so on. Okay? People tend to challenge the state. Whether a revolution has been institutionalized or not, at least in the Indian context, perhaps at times you will find some kind of change has been witnessed, okay, but that is negligible. Okay, perhaps the only very important revolutionary change that took place, of course, it is not a socialist one, but obviously a humanist one, that you will find in the context of the kind of independence that we got in 1947. That is excellent, no doubt about it. Okay? Otherwise, that kind of revolutionary changes we have not witnessed so far. Okay? That is why as we began with a threefold debate about the prospects of revolution and the search for a revolutionary class which have provided the first focus of this threefold debate, and secondly revolutionary organizations and their relation to the classes or masses, the issue of a vanguard revolutionary party, of a guerrilla Foucault, and so on. And thirdly, that of the state and revolution, and more specifically of the nature of the states, or nature of the state in which, or the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been content. One, of the states where revolutionaries challenge, of the states which revolutionaries challenge, and of the state within which a revolution has been institutionalized. Okay? The political context that we are going to discuss now, the political context must be examined against the backdrop of the nature of the state, where revolutions have been content. The political state assumes, the political context assumes greater significance when we tend to examine the states where or which revolutionaries challenge, and we also must understand the political context against the backdrop of the state within which a revolution becomes institutionalized. Okay. Okay. It's extremely important. Now, the political context that triggered off and fed the debate is not far to seek. The 1968 Vietnam, France, United States, China, Czechoslovakia, the death of Che Guevara and Allende in the Latin American backyard of the United States, the many stabilizations that followed, and the increasing melee of those craving rapid change yet faced with the strength and violence of the world's many establishments, crimes and casualties perpetrated by the world's many establishments, starting from American hegemony to European hegemony. No less significant for the argument were the dramatic lessons in the inadequacies of theoretical thought, left and right alike. The 1968 wave of radicalism in the context of students' upsurge in France, the split between the ideological split between the People's Republic of China on the one hand and the Soviet and the erstwhile Soviet Union on the other, the depth of the economic crisis in the West, the cultural revolution in the People's Republic of China, the impact of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, Cambodia, Khomeini or the Ogaden, none of which had been predicted or even adequately explained, ex post factum. New events within an increasingly global scene have challenged, exploded and transformed the structures of our understanding and the boundaries of intuitive plausibility. The exceptional significance of evidence drawn from the so-called developing societies for the reconsideration and redefinition of contemporary social sciences is consequent on it. Tensions between reality and social theory have been most explicit, and the challenge to deduction more illuminating and profound precisely in those societies. Why I'm referring to the tensions between a reality and social theory. What is a theory? A theory refers to a set of interrelated propositions or ideas intended to explain facts or events. A theory cannot be devoid of empirical practice, reality. Okay. A theory always depicts reality. As the real world phenomena change, our theories also should undergo transformation. That is why nothing is static, right? A theory cannot be static, it is pretty dynamic. But when our real world phenomena undergo changes and our theories do not change, then you will witness a tension between real world phenomena on the one hand and social, economic, political theory on the other, cultural theory on the other. That is why when we say this, that if our reality, our practical needs, our real world phenomena, okay, they are never static, they always keep on changing, and when they keep on changing, we also must revisit our theory where it can accommodate the changes. If the existing theory cannot accommodate those changes, then we should bring in newer and newer theories. So, we should revise those theories according to the changes in the real world phenomena that we tend to witness, right. That is why there should be always a dialectical relationship between real world phenomena on the one hand and theoretical vantage points on the other. Okay. Unfortunately, what happens in reality that people become very rigid about certain theories and they tend to lose sight of the changes in our real world phenomena. Okay. Then that theory does not remain at the level of theory, rather that theory becomes an ideology. Okay. That theory becomes a part of dictum. If you look at Marx's work on the German ideology, he was trying to look at ideologies in general first and the German ideology in particular. Here Marx must be evaluated from two vantage points. One, Marx as a theoretician, and two, Marx as an ideologue of the Communist Party. The present course, Sociology of Development, okay, the way it has been framed, the way it has been outlined, okay, does not allow me to look at Marx as an ideologue of the Communist Party. I am not interested also Marx as an ideologue of the Communist Party, but I am more interested in Marx as a top-notch theoretician. Even while dwelling upon ideologies in general and the German ideology in particular. What are ideologies according to Marx? Ideologies are myths, ideologies are fantasies, ideologies are inverted images, ideologies are echoes of material life. In quest of truth, in quest of knowledge, one has to go beyond the narrow confinements of his or her own ideologies. Even Marx said this while dwelling upon ideologies in general and the German ideology in particular. Okay? That is why I repeat that in quest of truth, in quest of knowledge, one has to go beyond the narrow confinements of his or her own ideologies. That is extremely important, because if one is rigid about social theory, then perhaps he or she loses sight of the changes in the real world phenomena, and that social theory does not remain at the level of theory, and that social theory becomes an ideology. And that ideology that we tend to encounter from social theory, and such rigidity within social theory, which has led us to formulate ideologies, okay, they do not allow us, they do not permit us to look at the ground reality, they do not allow us to look at the changes in our real world scenario, and as a consequence of which we also lack theorization, we lack improvisation in our capacity to theorize and so on. Okay? And in this context, I said the exceptional, or rather the new events, that we tend to see within an increasingly global scene have challenged, exploded and transformed the structures of our understanding and the boundaries of intuitive plausibility. Okay? New events have taken place, new phenomena have appeared, and when new events have taken place, new phenomena have appeared, then we must revisit those theories. Okay? That we must be able to creatively use or deploy those theories. Okay? That is why I said the way new events, new phenomena within an increasingly global scene have challenged, exploded, expanded and transformed the structures of our understanding and the boundaries of intuitive plausibility, the exceptional significance of evidence drawn from the so called developing societies for the reconsideration and redefinition of contemporary social sciences is consequent on it. Tensions between reality and social theory have been most explicit, and the challenge to deduction more illuminating and profound precisely in those societies. Precisely because if you look at the developing societies and the kind of contemporary social sciences that we tend to witness, perhaps we are not getting Western, rather contemporary social sciences in developing societies, developing economies in general and India in particular. We are not getting Western, rather we are getting Westoxicated. If I have to quote Professor Dipankar Gupta, in Mistaken Modernity, he used the term Westoxicated. Okay? We are not becoming Western, we are becoming Westoxicated. Whatever the West suggests, whichever technology the West uses, okay, we tend to ape them. We tend to copy them. Okay? By doing that, we are not becoming Western, rather we are becoming Westoxicated. Okay? In this context, if you look at the whole scenario of the discussion that we have had till now, you will find that the radical upsurge of 1968 perhaps marks an intellectual and political departure from the conventional Marxism. Okay? And then we have discussed revolutionary tactics and strategies of or the nature of revolutions as such, tactics and strategies of revolutionary struggles. Okay? And then the threefold debate so far as the search for the agencies of revolutionary change and an analysis of the impediments which form the crux of a threefold debate. I mean the prospects of revolution and the search for revolutionary class, secondly revolutionary organizations and their relation to the classes or masses, and the state and revolution, I mean the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been contained, of the states which revolutionaries challenge, and of the state within which a revolution becomes institutionalized, they must be examined in these contexts. Okay, this is important. That 1968 Vietnam, France, United States, China, Czechoslovakia, and the political military murders of Che Guevara and Allende in the Latin American backyard of the United States, crimes and casualties of the world's many establishments, inadequacies of theoretical thought, left and right alike, the 1968 wave of radicalism split between the People's Republic of China on the one hand and the erstwhile Soviet Union on the other, USSR on the other, economic crisis in the West, cultural revolution in the People's Republic of China, and the impact of the OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And that is how we have discussed how nature of revolutions undergo changes, how revolutionary tactics and revolutionary strategies ought to change with the changes in our real world phenomena, with the changes in our real world events, new events. Okay, when new events occur, when new phenomena appear, okay, within an increasingly global scene, okay, which pose challenges to the existing theory, okay, and that is how they tend to transform the structures of our understanding and the boundaries of intuitive plausibility. Okay, that is why I keep on reiterating that the political context which formed the crux of the debate about the nature of revolution, about the revolutionary tactics in the short run and the revolutionary strategies in the long run, it is of paramount significance of evidence drawn from the so called developing economies for the reconsideration and redefinition of contemporary social sciences, modern social sciences, and the tensions between the real world phenomena on the one hand and our social, economic, political, cultural theory on the other. They have been most explicit now, and the challenge to deduction more illuminating and profound precisely in the so called developing societies. Okay. Now, what we are going to do, we are going to discuss class, state and revolution in the context of substitutes and realities. We are going to focus on the search for the revolutionary class, prospects of revolution and the search for the revolutionary class, the first point. Okay. Then there are two revolutionary classes which have appeared till now as having the capability or as being the harbingers of the proletarian revolution, working class revolution. The reconsideration of established concepts in the light of new and often, when I say new, often non-European, non-American developments lies at the core of the post-1968 debate. That is why 1968 is extremely important in the context of development studies in general and politics and sociology of development in particular. The discussion of the early 1970s about the revolutionary classes and revolutionary perspectives was both an example of it and an important case in itself. The argument unfolded within the basic framework of the Marxist tradition. This implied a common commitment to change aimed at abolishing the social base of exploitation and domination of human by human. It accepted sociological perspective whose major components are the determining impact of political economy and of class conflict within social structure. And it also accepted revolutionary violence as the probable and indeed usual, though not obligatory way of bringing about the necessary social changes. And at this point, however, paths began to diverge. Okay? That we will discuss in the next lecture. Okay? On what, against what parameters, against the backdrop of which parameters paths began to diverge. Okay? But now we are more interested, I mean the focus of this, of today's lecture is how to reconsider the established concepts in the light of the newly independent nations, new nations which have been decolonized. Often, when I say they are decolonized, I mean basically they are non-European nations, and the kind of new developments that we tend to witness, they lie at the core of the post 1968 debate about the nature of revolutions, about the tactics and strategies of revolutionary struggles. When I said the discussion of the 1970s, of the early 1970s about revolutionary classes and perspectives, that the search for revolutionary classes and perspectives, that became both an example of it and an important case in itself, such argument unfolded within the basic framework of the Marxist tradition. I mean the search for revolutionary classes. Okay? This implied a common commitment to change aimed at abolishing the social base of exploitation and domination of human by human. That is why once it was a poem, I mean written in 1798, lines written in early spring by William Wordsworth, when he wrote, "Have I not the reason to lament what man has made of man?" What man has made of man, it is precisely because of the kind of exploitation and domination, subordination, antagonism of class interests, oppression, and so on. Have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? That is what William Wordsworth wrote in lines written in early spring in 1798, that he was trying to make a scathing attack on such exploitation and domination, subordination, oppression of human by human. Okay? What it implies, that have I not reason to lament what man has made of man, it implies that the joy that man perceives in the natural world and his belief that his own soul is somehow intimately connected to that joy leads Wordsworth to mourn what man has made of man. In other words, the cruelty, the selfishness, the endemic wars, the domination, the exploitation in the name of caste, in the name of gender, in the name of race, in the name of ethnicity, in the name of tribe, in the name of security, okay, in the name of class fighting, that characterize humanity. While humans are essentially part of nature, they certainly do not act like it. Okay? That is how we tend to act against nature. Okay? Not in the sense that we want to use nature for our survival also, but we want, but while attempting to utilize nature for our survival, we have in reality we have destroyed nature. That is what Wordsworth was referring to. Okay? My primary concern is not to look at Wordsworth here, but I am trying to look at this from different vantage points, from philosophy, from literature, from political science, from economics and so on. Okay? But my central concern is sociology of development. Okay? That is why I said when the argument about the search for revolutionary classes, the search for revolutionary perspectives, when such argument unfolded within the basic framework of the Marxist tradition, starting from the works of Marx and Engels to Lenin to Stalin to other eminent authors, maybe Reid, maybe Mao Zedong and others. If you Paul M. Swiji, Hamza Alawi, Theodore Sanin, Prabhat Patnaik, Samir Amin, Walden Bellow, Immanuel Wallerstein, Anthony Giddens, and so on. You can go on and on. I mean, Amartya Sen. If you look at that how the argument unfolded within the basic framework of the Marxist tradition, it implies a common commitment to change. Change in terms of what? Change in terms of what? Change, when I say, I refer to modes of production. Modes of production are nothing but a combination of forces of production and relations of production. Okay? When I say this implies common commitment to the changes in the modes of production, changes in our intellectual and political consciousness. When our intellectual and political consciousness rises, when our modes of production change towards improved modes of production, okay, then we tend to aim at abolishing the social base of exploitation and domination of human by human. That is extremely important. Now, whites exploit the blacks, the upper caste groups exploit the lower castes, men oppress women. Now, the plains oppress the hills. Now, the Western capitalist world oppresses the less developing economies, okay, in terms of trade, in terms of exchange, in terms of business, in terms of commerce, in terms of exim policy, I mean export-import policy and so on. Then in this context, the kind of change that we are referring to, that change we are referring to in terms of the change in the modes of production, the change in the intellectual and political consciousness, and perhaps where the questions of equity, accessibility, democratization, social inclusion, they will be accommodated more. Okay? That is why what we have done till now, we have discussed the radical upsurge of 1968 and its aftermath were linked to and followed by a renewed debate between the socialists about the nature of revolutions and the tactics and strategies of revolutionary struggles, a search for the agencies of revolutionary change and an analysis of the impediments formed the crux of a threefold debate. The prospects of social revolution and the search for the revolutionary class of our time have provided the first focus. those sneeringly referred to by their adversaries as third worldists opposed proletarianists to coin an equally ugly term. A second argument cross-cut the first, concentrating on revolutionary organizations and their relation to the classes or masses, the issue of a vanguard, a revolutionary party, of a guerrilla foco, and so on. And the third problem, the last to be confronted but not the least in importance, has been that of state and revolution, or more specifically of the nature of the state in societies where revolutions have been contained, of the states which revolutionaries challenge, and of the state within which a revolution becomes institutionalized. And the political context that we have discussed, that triggered off and fed the debate, is not far to seek. We have discussed how the 1968 Vietnam, France, United States, China and Czechoslovakia, the death of both Che Guevara and Allende in the Latin American backyard of the United States, the many stabilizations that followed, and the increasing malaise of those craving rapid change yet faced with the strength and violence of the world's many establishments. And then we have discussed the relationship between the real world phenomena on the one hand and social, economic, political and cultural theory on the other, how they should not be treated in isolation. And then we have discussed the reconsideration of established concepts in the light of the new, often non-European developments that lies at the core of the post 1968 debate. The discussion of the early 1970s about revolutionary classes and perspectives was both an example of it and an important case in itself. The argument that unfolded within the basic framework of the Marxist tradition, this implied a common commitment to change aimed at abolishing the social base of exploitation and domination. I mean, change in terms of forces, modes of production, how relations of production, how forces of production, they undergo change with changes in intellectual and political consciousness. Tomorrow, what we are in the next lecture, what we are going to do, we are going to discuss this aspect of common commitment to change aimed at abolishing the social base of exploitation and domination, how it accepted a sociological perspective whose major components are at the determining impact of political economy and of class conflict within class structure or within social structure. It also accepted revolutionary violence as the probable and indeed usual, though not obligatory, way of bringing about the necessary social changes. Okay? And how at this point nevertheless paths began to diverge, how conventional Marxism or orthodox Marxism was challenged by the new trends within the basic framework of Marxist tradition, we are going to discuss in the next lecture. Thank you.